Hello, I'm Joseph Avila, and I'll be doing a presentation on the slideshow created by my partner and I, Mattson, on the Winecoff hotel fire. At the time that the fire occurred, it was the worst hotel fire disaster in history with the most casualties. First, a little bit on the background of the building. It was built in 1913 in Atlanta, Georgia, occupied a plot of 63 by 70 feet, was 15 stories and approximately 150 feet in height with a full basement. The floors were numbered 1 through 16, however there was no 13th floor, which was common at the time because the number 13 is considered bad luck. There was 200 guest rooms, many of which were inhabited by permanent occupants and many of which were also elderly. At the time that the fire occurred, the building was practically full with 300 guests. Now the building construction. At the time that the fire occurred, the building was constructed what was called fireproof, although that might be a misnomer and might have given the occupants and the owners of the building some false sense of security. The framing was protected steel framing. The roofs and floors were also made of protected steel beams and girders with concrete filling and tiles. The exterior walls of the building were 12-inch thick brick paneling, and the interior walls were divided hollow tile style. The interior of the building, the doors were predominantly made of plywood. The hallway walls were decorated with a burlap covering. The hallway floors were made of carpet over felt padding. The guest room doors were wood framed. The guest room walls were papered with painted ceilings, and the window coverings were either draped or had wood blinds. Each room had 1 to 2 pieces of upholstered wood furniture. Now, an overview of the fire incident that occurred that night. At sometime around 3:30 a.m., the elevator operator detected the odor of smoke and reported it to the night clerk. The night clerk went up to the second floor to investigate and could see flames on the upper floors. At about 3:40, the night clerk called the fire department and initiated the first alarm. After calling the alarm, the night clerk began calling the guests by telephone, starting with the manager. By the time the fire department arrived, the third and fifth floors were completely involved in the fire. During the fire, the heaviest destruction occurred on floors 7 through 12. It was not until 6:30 a.m. that the firefighters reached the top floor and were almost completely extinguishing. In total, there was 119 deaths with additional 100 people injured. Many of those that were injured were firefighters. So here's a look at the floor plans. Here specifically is a floor plan of the third floor. So the blue box here indicates where the origin of the fire was in this corridor. The red is the elevators and the green is the stairways. One of the reasons why they say the fire spread so fast is that these stairways were completely open and allowed smoke and hot gases to quickly rise to the building. So what kind of fire prevention did the hotel have? Nothing at all, really. There was no centralized alarm so that the night clerk, when he found the fire, could let all the occupants of the building know or send a signal to the fire department. There was no sprinkler system, so when the fire started, there was no way to somehow keep the fire from growing. There was no organized watchman service, meaning that there was no trained personnel that were going floor to floor during different times of the day or the night to see if there was a fire or smoke or some type of odor that would alert them to a fire. There were standpipes in the stairwells. Those were used by the fire department to advance their lines as they were fighting the fire on the separate floors. However, many of the standpipes that were found, the hoses were completely burnt. And how did this have an effect on fire codes? So at the time, the local building and fire code conditions did not cover what was happening in the building. Some codes were enacted prior to the fire, but later the city discarded these codes because they were considered too severe. After this fire, along with some other hotel fires, President Truman called the National Conference on Fire Prevention to investigate how they could make conditions safer in hotels and prevent disasters like these again. And then also at the same time, the International Association of Fire Chiefs made a committee to make recommendations that can help improve fire and life safety in hotels. Many of the recommendations that came from the IAFC and from the National Conference on Fire Prevention was training and educated personnel that could do inspections, a protected means of egress and self-closing fire-resistive doors were incorporated into the NFPA's building exit code, and then this code later went on to be the NFPA 101 Life Safety Code, which is the code that is followed today. And that concludes my presentation.